Hi everyone, Acesup here for PokerNerd. Thanks for joining me again for the final part now of this PokerStars $530 Bounty Builder review. In case you missed parts 1 and 2, I'll leave a link for those in the description. It's been an epic duel versus high stakes regular Raid-A-Lot, but a few well-timed bluffs and catching a few nice hands has put us out in front with the chip lead. Let's keep going now, reviewing each of the hands played and see how continuing to execute a solid heads-up strategy results in us taking this one down for over $30,000. Ace King offsuit, and I've thrown in the limp here, and Raid-A-Lot has put the 2-bet out there. Love to see that. So this is a low frequency play I'll make, obviously with some strong hands. I generally prefer to use hands a little bit stronger, suited combos and bigger pairs, but certainly mixing in a few Ace King offsuit combos is good. He has 2-bet a little bit, but not tons. But we see here that he has again, so I go ahead and just rip it in. I would have preferred to have seen a smaller raise. That might give him perceived fold equity on a 4-bet. So maybe we could have just made it 700,000. And you know, he might then rip ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace 9 suited or something weird, who knows. I think this was more of a sort of a meta-gamey play where I was just hoping he might sort of spaz out since we only limped and just think, hey, you're just getting annoyed with me 2-betting. Do you really have a monster that you've just limped in with now? And just make a light call. But I think it would have been better, like I said, to make a smaller inducer. And just as well, just get him to call with some worse hands. You know, that we dominate. If we do just 4-bet, he might call with king queen or, you know, ace 10, ace 5 suited or something. King 3 offsuit, defend against the raise. Flop goes check, check. Turn, check. This is very close, given what I've said about the way he c-bets the flop. I think he's more inclined to have 9x or some other middling strength hands like pocket 6s or something, 8s. And that makes it quite close with the hand this week, but I think it's just a little bit too strong to fold given we only need 23% equity. And now on the river, when we hit this miracle 3, I'd really like to see a lead bet here. I can see I did check, but I think it would have been better to bet because of the way we can construct his range. Given his c-betting tendency, I think he's very likely to have a medium strength hand that has showdown value that would check the flop, bet the turn, like 10s, 8s, 9x. Maybe he checked for a free card with 7-10 or 7-8, the gut shot, and then decides to bet the turn with it. 6s, 5s, some ace high that maybe picked up a draw or just bets the turn for protection. But something like that is the bigger part of his range, and it's not going to bet, but it will call a bet, especially that hand, I think, because again, when you combine the range that we can construct for him, given his tendencies about the way he plays the flop, with the fact that on the river he generally calls value bets too light, he calls a little bit too loose, so I think we could have got some value on the river. I like that one. Got the king high and the gut shot. 7-8 offsuit, going to call. Make a pair on the turn, so we fire. Raid-A-Lot calls. And on the river, happy to just check it and try and show it down. And again, we see he missed value there. That's a pretty easy value bet. He's thrown out the 3.5 times our open here. So I'm just going to fold that hand. 6-7 off. Defend. Pretty bad flop, but we do pick up an up and down draw on the turn. So I fired. I don't mind it. And then on the river, I think once we make a pair, it makes sense just to check and just hope that he has a 4 or, you know, missed a flush draw or something like that. He's probably again going to have a middling strength hand because he did check the flop. So not too surprised to see that hand. It's a good result for us. Just chipping up, taking the lead back. Queen 4. Fold to the check raise. 5-9 off fold. 5-7 limp. Stab with the gutser. Take it down. Ten jack suited, defend. Pretty good flop, backdoor flush with the double belly. So we have an easy call. You could throw in a few check raises. I think I don't mind calling though, given what I said about his tendency. We may sometimes actually have the best hand and we have such a good draw. And I wouldn't want to get 3-bet on the flop. I mean, I think it plays just fine the way we're going about it. See that he does want to put more money in the pot on the turn. So I think given that he's likely to have a very strong hand here, we want to just call. We only need 23% equity. Even though we only have 8 outs, so we'll get there around 16% of the time. Yeah, I just think he's quite likely to have a strong hand here. So we sometimes do get, I think, to check raise the river if we do get there and win a huge pot. But we can see he just checks back. And again, just miss value. Pretty easy value bet, especially when you think that it's very hard for us since we don't 3-bet pre to have a better hand. And there was a lot of draws, you know, king jack, 10 jack, 9-10, all that sort of stuff that he could maybe barrel with. So again, sometimes we would probably call down with just a pair of queens, at least in the normal context. Here, of course, we've adjusted. Limp fold. Queen 10, easy call versus the raise. I think I would probably check raise this flop quite a bit. But instead, I decide to lead the turn here because he checked back on the flop. I think with the 2 high cards and the 3rd nut flush draw, it's good play. We would have had to probably have bombed the river though if he called, given his tendency to be a bit more showdown orientated when he checks flop. I decided to check back here with the bottom pair. Seems okay. Really good turn, obviously, and he bets into us. I think this bet is going to be a combination of King X, Queen X, and 9X and flush draws. And, well, Ace-8 suited, and we raise it up. Raid a lot calls. Decided to check back on the flop, which is, I think, fine with the bottom pair here on this board. We do see him lead into us on the turn here, which he hasn't really done much of. I think given how drawy the board is, I'd like to see a raise here. I did just call, but I think raising is the way to go. I think the reason why I just called is because I said on the drawy boards, he doesn't tend to bluff too much. But there's just so many draws here, and he just could have a lot of hands that don't really fancy check calling, but don't mind taking a bit of a stab. And, you know, obviously he's going to have some value hands even that we have beat, like the weaker 2 pairs. So should have raised turn, I think, here and just charged him and tried to get value. Obviously on the river, we can go for a real chunky size, since if he's got a straight, he's going to call. If he's got a flush, he's going to call. If he just led the turn with an ace, he's probably, well, he will call. That would be a little bit unlike him though, but I could see him making a few hero calls there, given the line that we took. So I think sizing up is okay. Ace-8 defend. I go for the check raise here, which I like. You want to have a few middle pairs in your check raising range. And on a board like this, where there's a number of draws that we don't mind protecting from or getting value from, I think it's quite good. And then the turn is a close decision, but I think we can actually check now. We notice that he does fire. So I think that he can still have enough 10 queen, queen 9, you know, flush draws, or some other weird stuff that we just have to continue. The 10 is a bad card, obviously, because some of the stuff I just mentioned gets there. But thankfully he checked. And he just had the king 8. So that was interesting. It was one of those times that he actually did bet a little bit more merged on the flop with the middle pair, which is obviously completely fine. I don't know why he bet the turn though, because we can still have sort of the hand like we had, or some Jack X, or just some other tricky stuff. And, we might sometimes follow through with semi-bluffs, especially since it was a diamond on the turn. So when we check, I think our range is a mixture of sort of pretty strong hands that don't mind getting to showdown with a check call, or just give ups. So that being the case, I think he's better off just checking and bluff catching with this hand. Bet the flop, take it down. Queen 7 suited, get a walk. Queen 6 offsuit, limp. And I think we can just bet that flop. I did check it. Check the turn. And I guess we just showdown now. You could argue for a value bet, I guess. Small, just a min bet or something. Folded there. Ace 4 offsuit, raise. Red lot defends. Decided to check this flop this time and fold on the turn. Jack 9 offsuit. Call the raise and have to check fold on that flop. 6-9 raise, c-bet. Ready lot calls. I think probably it's pretty close, isn't it? We can get value from some 7-8, 7-9, 3-4, hands like Queen Jack with a club. So I think there is some merit to betting on the turn. We do know that he floats very wide. This is a monotone board though, so it's a little bit of a special situation. But I'm sure he still has some pretty wide stuff, like, say like 10-7 with a club. Well, that wouldn't be that bad, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I guess we could just go either way on the turn. He did just have the king high, so I think he played it okay. Fold. Get a walk. King, queen, raise. I decided to check back on the flop, which with this hand is okay. We've got some good showdown. And it allows our opponent to sometimes make a pair when we dominate him. For example, if he has, king 5, now we both have top pair, we can get a lot of value. And it just controls the pot from the flop. I decided to check again here. This is just a play that I'll make at a low frequency, just to induce bluffs, and just so that when I take certain lines in the game tree, I can have a lot of different hands. So just because I've checked twice, it doesn't mean I'm capped, I'm weak. I can still have top pair, good kicker. So it's just sort of a low frequency play I'll make to give my range some protection. And in this instance, induce some bluffs and just allow us to get some value on the river from hands like, ace high, or hands that just make a pair on the river and so forth. And there wasn't that much to protect from anyway, was there? Fold there. Folding. Queen 10 defending. I like this bet on the turn. We've got the double belly, and again, he does generally check more showdown value hands, or medium strength hands, I should say, on the flop. So he's more likely to have a 4x, pocket sixes, king high, stuff that can't really take too much heat. He will have a little bit of Jack X. So that being the case, I don't think we can fold that out. And we do have a pair of 10s, which might be the best hand, so I check. And he did just have the king high on the flop and hit the 8 on the turn, so I feel like by this stage of the battle, I would have been really locked into his tendencies, and it would have given us quite a big advantage in the match. So just continuing to, bob and weave and try and take advantage or exploit the way he's playing whenever we can, and refrain from taking any big risks. And we do have a commanding chip lead now, so it's going quite well. Having said that, we have had a pretty good distribution of cards. We've had some nice hands, so made the most of them, I think, for the most part, so that's good. Did miss a few spots, but it's hard to get all the spots right. Go ahead and c-bet here on the flop. Pretty clear value bet again on the turn. Folds, probably had one of his wide floats. Get a walk with 4-7. Jack 2 raise, and I think we can go ahead and c-bet here with the gut shot backdoor flush. Do make the straight on the turn, which is nice. I think we just want to go ahead and fire again. Do that, get called. It's kind of a bad river. Not so much because he can have a 6. I mean, he could, but just makes it a little bit harder to get value from some of the weaker parts of his range. Now he's going to be more afraid since there's more straights. So definitely going to value bet, obviously, but yeah, it's just going to be a little bit hard to get those weaker pairs to call that might have heroed on a drier card like a 10 or something. I just rip here with the 5s, which I like. He is pretty deep for it. He has M18-ish. But this is definitely going to be the most profitable way to play this hand in this situation. Remember, pocket 5s have a PN of 44, so it's just super profitable, and they don't play that well post-flop. So shoving them is by far the most profitable line to take. I've done a lot of research in that spot. Since we just shoved, I decided to shove again here with the ace-jack suited. I think it's okay. He's only got around M16-ish now. I probably would have preferred to just see a 3-bet though to, 350. Just again to give him some room in case he wants to 4-bet shove with some hands that we have in bad shape. I think that would have been a better line. Or maybe just continue with some hands that we have in bad shape, like 10-jack and so forth. But I went for the finishing blow, but he folded. And now he shoves on us. He limps and I just rip it. It's okay. Again, we could just 2-bet non-all-in. I think I was kind of thinking that he might, now he's this short, sort of not give up, but just say, you know what, I'm down to under 2 million. I'm really struggling. I'm going to go for it and just make some loose calls. But I don't think he's like that at all. I think because he's known for being quite a rich businessman, I might have anticipated that incorrectly because he's actually a real fighter. I mean, he just never gives up. And it was very clear that he just wanted to win and was going to battle to the death. So I really respect him for that. And I think he played fantastically well. But I think just between the fact that, we've had a pretty good run of cards and locked into a few things that we could take advantage of, it's going to allow us to get the better of him here. Folding there. Limp. Gut shot, stab. Kind of a bad turn. I mean, I don't think we get him off any pair. And we do beat some draws he could have. Like, obviously, the, 5-7, 6-7, 10-6, 10-7, so forth. He had the queen, so I think he would have been better off betting the river bot. So in this limp pot, he's checked the flop, and I've checked again on the turn, which, I think doing from time to time with 2-pair to try and induce and just get him to call on the river is fine. He did have 4s, so it worked out well. Again, once he checks on the flop, he's more inclined, I think, to have that sort of hand. And that being the case, I would have preferred to have seen a bet on the turn to get value from those small pairs and 6x, and especially if he has a spade in his hand, get a little bit of value and protection. But Yep, throwing in a few checks, not too bad. Folded 3-9. 2-3 suited. He lets us get a chop. Just checks it down. Again, that was one of those spots where he probably just could have bet for protection. Just to deny equity. He's allowing us to realize our equity a little bit more than he should when he's in position. Limp, so we check with the 7-10. He fires turn and takes it down. Ace-5. I limped. I don't really like it. I mean, we're still pretty deep. It's not like I'm going to limp shove M20 if he does 2-bet. I don't think I would. So I think just raising is the better play here. I mean, it's okay to occasionally limp hands like this, so you do have a few aces in your limping range. But default, definitely just to raise. I mean, ace-5 offsuit does have a PN of 21, and so since he has an M of 20, but his 2-betting range means he doesn't have a random hand, he's more likely to have a stronger hand. You can't really profitably limp shove it. Thankfully, we got a good flop. Made life easy. King 9 here. I think calling the flop is pretty standard. The overcard, backdoor straight, backdoor flush. And I don't think we can call the turn. There's just too many draws he can have, and our hand is just a little bit too strong. We only need 26% equity. But he does fire again on the river. Wow, this is a close one, isn't it? What would you do? It's limp. Bet half pot, just over. Bet just over half pot. You know, when he's using just over these half pot sizes, it tends to be very, very value orientated. So I actually feel like he's got a queen here. This sizing that he's used is indicative of the play he's been making for value. But we do have a reasonably strong hand on this board where, you know, he can have some misdraws like, you know, 10 jack, 8 10 flushes. We do block some of that stuff though. King 10, King Jack, the flush draw with a spade. And occasionally a hand like Ace 3 gets there as well. But he did limp in pre, so I guess he doesn't have many aces. Yeah, this might just be a fold, to be honest. I honestly can't remember this hand, but looking at it now, I think it could just be a fold. And he did have the aces and limp in. So he got us pretty good there. Yeah, just a very unfortunate turn. After we raise pre and he calls a go ahead and c-bet here. Seems okay. And then fire the second shell here. I like this because of the way he's been playing. He has been floating really wide. So I think this is okay. And we have the gut shot. Take it down. Good one. I just jam over the limp here. It's fine. Fold the 10 deuce offsuit. Defend with the 7-10 offsuit. Pretty good flop. I like the decision to bet turn here. Again, he tends to be kind of holding medium strength hands a lot here. So occasionally we will bump into a hand like queens. But a lot of the time I think he's just going to have a hand like ace high or pocket threes or something, which now gets counterfeited. So I guess by betting, we're really specifically targeting the ace high, which, given there were flush and straight draws on the turn, I could see him heroing with. He will have the other 7 a lot, though. And he does. Jack 8 limp. I think with 2 overs and a gut shot, betting the flop is fine. Calling the turn is probably okay as well, if we do check. But by the river, I think we have to fold. 8-3, no good. 6-9 offsuit. Limp and stab. I like it. I mean, we've probably got the best hand. We've got a draw as well, albeit a weak one. But I think there's enough worse hands that will call that we can get some value. And we'll be stabbing pretty wide on this board. So definitely want to throw in as much value as we can. And since we limped, we don't have that much ace-x. Did check the turn though. I think it's getting a little bit hard to get multiple streets. Fortunately, we make 2 pair on the river. I think that this is just a call and nothing else because of the way our opponent plays. We know that he doesn't value bet thinly. So most of the time here, he's just got better 2 pair or a flush, or just something like 8-10 with a spade. So definitely just call. And it was the former, unfortunately, a strong hand. So we lose that one. Check here with queen 4 and fold on the flop. King 6, raise, take it down. King 3, call a raise. I think we could probably call on this flop. We got the king high card. Little bit of backdoor equity with the flush, but yeah, I think we just show this hand down. Especially against raid a lot. I mean, we are pretty low down in our range, but we can still have a few weaker hands like 6-7 of spades or 3-4 of hearts that I'd prefer to bluff with. And I think king high will just be the best hand at a decent frequency, and it is. So that works out well. Ace 10 offsuit, I've gone for the limp here. I would have preferred just to have seen a raise again. Limping this hand from time to time is okay, but definitely don't want to overdo it. Just trying to mix things up, I think, here a little bit more than I need to. Just play solid, and we can finish him off. Don't need to get too fancy. I really like the way I played it post, though. So we did stab flop, and then on the jack turn, fired big, over pot. Put maximum pressure on the deuce, the 5, and sometimes he calls with worse. If he has got a hand like 6-7 of hearts or clubs, something like that, 3-4, he'll probably call and then check river. And then we have the option to take the showdown or bluff, or occasionally, if we're lucky, make a hand. Ideally, a queen, but I would take an ace or a 10 as well. But he does just fold on the turn, so that was a good one. King 8 offsuit. Limped pot, so we can go ahead and fire confidently on the turn. He folds. Ace 5, raise this time, that's good, take it down. Jack 2 suited, easy call against the min open here. And again, easy call on the flop. We've got middle pair, backdoor flush. Interesting turn card here, the repeat queen. And we see another queen on the river after it goes check, check on the turn. So obviously this hand is strong enough to value bet. And when you're thinking about our bluffing range, I guess we won't have that many bluffs that check call this flop. We can have 8-10, 9-10. We can have some flush draws. I think if we did have king or ace high, we won't have that much ace high, but especially the king high, hands like king 9, king 10, and the king high flush draws, they'd probably just take the showdown value and check. So we don't really have a ton of bluffs, but we shouldn't really have a ton of value either because, well, a queen is quads and that's just hard to make. And so most of our value hands are going to be Jack X. So I think all in all, we can size up a little bit, especially when you consider our opponent's inelasticity in this spot where they're likely to just call with any pair and ace high. And so I think that incentivizes us to go a little bit big, but not too massive. That's a pretty good size, around 300k. Yeah, I think I like it. But our opponent does just fold. But yeah, again, I just don't think there's any point to checking and trying to induce a bluff just because of our opponent's tendency to not really try and go for it in those spots. And we know they don't value bet thinly, so it's not like they're going to value worse. 10-4 off, fold. Ace king offsuit, and our opponent has M20. So we can 3-bet to around 400k or just all in. Don't mind either option. We have been shoving a bit, so it's consistent with sort of the way I've been approaching these spots. So I think it's okay, hoping that Raidelot will loosen up a bit now that he's getting short and we can finish him off. But just non all in 3-betting to get weaker hands to continue by either calling or shoving is also a pretty good option. So I think it's close. Queen 10 offsuit, and I've limped. This is really because we get our opponent to continue with some hands that we dominate, like Queen Deuce or 10-4, 10-3, and so forth, that may have folded if we raised. But also, and more importantly, it's just because Raider-Lot's got that stack size where he can just rip it in against a raise. And then, of course, if he did, we'd have to fold, and that would be kind of a waste of equity with this hand. So I will be doing a little bit more limping now that he's short. And we flop the nuts. So we're going to go ahead and start building the pot. He does call, so that's great. And it's an interesting turn card. When you're thinking about what our range looks like here, I mean, sure, we can have a few limps that were traps pre-flop, like aces and kings. But we'll also just have a lot of, Queen X, 10X, maybe some hands like 3-4 hearts and stuff. So we do have a few raggedy hands as well that might want to bluff on this texture, given the situation that we've just limped and these check back pre. So we could put the pressure on. And since we don't actually have that many strong hands since we've limped as well, I think we can size up a bit. And specifically with this hand that doesn't block any of the flush draws or pairs, I think just going for pot size is probably fine. But he does just fold, unfortunately. But just hoping he wasn't really going to believe that we did hit the ace there since we've limped in pre, and maybe continue with some flush draws or some hands that are at the top of his range, like King X, maybe Jack 10, maybe some Queen 9 or 9-10, that sort of thing. Though we did block that a little bit, some of those combo draws. Pocket sixes here, and pretty standard play to just rip over a limp with those raw equity hands. I've limped in here with the King 6 off. I might be overdoing it just a little bit here with the limps. I think could have just raised this hand as well. And then obviously if he shoves, just fold. So, but limping at a frequency is fine as well, and we can always just stab and take it down like we did. Queen 2, limped pot, flop goes check, check. Check it over to our opponent on the turn. We do have some showdown value, but we see a bet. I could go either way here. Given our opponent's tendency to check back the flop a bit more when they have showdown value, it makes me want to sort of lean towards folding here. But I did call, given that it's just a limp pot and the flop was checked, and we're getting a decent price with what might be the best hand sometimes with the Queen High, but definitely cannot call the river on the 9 there. Deuce 7 just folded. Queen 9 suited. Opponent limps, we check and flop the nuts. And our opponent bets. What a great situation. So thinking about our opponent's play up until this point, I think we're really incentivized to fast play here. So I put in a raise. And what I mean by that is that we know that they don't value bet thinly. So if they have got a hand like, say, King 7 with the 7 of clubs, they might feel that's strong enough to bet on the flop, but then check on the later streets, unless they get, really favorable cards, which a lot of the time they won't. And that leads me into the next point, is that we could get some action killing cards. Like, for example, a club could kill our action, especially if they're high up in their range, like if they've limped in with an ace X, for example. We can definitely get stacks in, which brings me to the next point, which is we can get stacks in because they're quite short now. So when you're thinking about all of those factors, I think that it's really in our interest to just build it on the flop and go for the finishing blow. Finish him. We have the nuts. And we cooled our opponent on the very last hand, which is a great feeling. How often does that happen when you've been playing for hours and you just get to the last hand where you can click call and have your opponent drawing dead? No sweat at all. Normally you at least have a sweat, but not this time. We did get a pretty good distribution of cards and ended up obviously here cool airing our opponent, but really well played by Raider-Lot. Great effort. and we were just lucky enough to get the W here and score the 33,000 that came along with the first place finish. So I was obviously rapt about that, and rapt that I got to share it with all of you. So thank you so much for joining me for this hand history review. I know it's been a long one. We've gone through hundreds of hands and broken many of them down and done a lot of analysis. At the start of the tournament, we were focusing more on the bounties and how that influences our decision. And of course, we spoke a lot about bounty factor. And then as the tournament progressed, we started to also factor in ICM. And then as we got to the heads up, of course, ICM and bounty factor were no longer playing a role. It was just more about exploiting our opponent and really thinking about the style that we should use and how we should adjust to them to give us the best chance to take this one down. You got to remember, I had no time bank at the end here, so a few decisions would have been a bit rushed, and you can't always play perfectly in the moment. But for the most part, I would change a few hands if I could, especially in the heads up. There was a couple, I think, of loose calls where I could have folded on the turn or by the river. But yeah, for the most part, I think the play was pretty good overall. And there was just so many interesting spots that came up that it really made for a great review, and I enjoyed making it. And I really hope that you've enjoyed watching it. And I wish you every success in the future, especially with your PKO tournaments. I hope this review will help you win your next one. This was Acesup for PokerNerve. Thanks for watching.
Knockout tournaments are the best value MTTs around, if you play them the right way. So be sure to check out PokerNerve's Bounty Hunter course and become the best player at your table. Thanks for watching.